Boyd closed his eyes, breathing in slowly through his nose. He tried to steady his voice. "Laurel, this is life or death. I'm not asking for much, just some help to get through the first few rounds." Laurel's tone softened, but her hesitation was clear. "I wish I could, Boyd, really. But everything is going into the wedding right now. Maybe after the honeymoon, we can figure something out." He felt the weight settling on his chest again. "All right, Laurel. Good luck with the wedding." "Thanks, Boyd. Take care, okay?" The call ended, leaving Boyd more isolated than before. He sat in his truck, gripping the steering wheel, and stared out at the looming St. Louis skyline. In that moment, he understood he'd have to face this struggle alone. He considered calling his kids, but Madison and Connor rarely answered unless they wanted money or permission for something. Besides, their mother had likely already told them to focus on upcoming finals and spring break trips, not their father's troubles. For a long while, Boyd just sat, letting the weight of the diagnosis, abandonment, and mounting bills settle over him. Just as the evening sun began to dip below the horizon, he resolved to reach out to one last person, his old friend Dan, who'd worked beside him in the trucking business for over 20 years. If anyone could offer more than platitudes, it would be Dan. Boyd nodded, gripping the phone tighter. "Yes, the other matter. If you can pull any strings, now's the time." Frank's voice was steady. "I'll reach out tonight. Expect a call from Dr. Lynn at Johns Hopkins within 48 hours. And Boyd, you did the hard part already. You asked. The rest? You'll get through it, soldier." A faint smile tugged at Boyd's lips. "Thanks, Frank. I appreciate it more than you know. Keep your phone close and stay strong. We fight battles, not funerals," Frank said, before the line clicked off. Boyd looked around his quiet kitchen, the ticking wall clock growing louder by the minute. He wondered how everything had changed so quickly. One day, you're thinking about retiring. The next, you're fighting to live. Still, there was hope. Distant, but there. He packed up his documents, feeling a flicker of resolve. If Frank's contacts could get him enrolled in that experimental program, maybe he had a fighting chance, not just to survive, but to prove to himself that he was more than the sum of his family's disappointment. That night, Boyd sat on the porch, sipping his bourbon and listening to the soft chirping of crickets as the darkness deepened. The future was uncertain, but for now, he wasn't beaten yet. We moved sensitive cargo for some very powerful people, sometimes even things that needed to stay off the books, Boyd explained. Make discreet inquiries. See if there's anything that could give us leverage if we need it. Violet nodded, her eyes keen with understanding. I'll dig around. Discretion, as always. Boyd gave her a grateful smile. You're the best, Violet. And keep this between us, at least until I know where things stand. She squeezed his arm affectionately. We'll get through this, Boyd, one way or another. Buoyed by Violet's loyalty, Boyd dove into his own research, sorting through client files and old contracts, looking for any threads he could pull if push came to shove. He called his accountant, making preparations to transfer assets and secure his employees' livelihoods, should he have to leave Mitchell Transport behind. Outside, the late spring sun washed over the truck yard, glinting off the freshly washed rigs as drivers hustled about. It was a world Boyd knew inside and out, forged one hard-earned contract at a time. He realized as he watched Violet skillfully handle a logistics crisis on the phone that it was these people, his true team, who had his back when his own family would not. As he worked through the morning, a certainty settled in Boyd's heart. Whatever happened in the weeks ahead, he would face it head-on, armed with the truth, surrounded by those who truly valued him. The parking lot of Willowbrook Country Club was filled with luxury cars, sleek BMWs, shining Bentleys, and more Porsches than Boyd could count. His battered Silverado stood out like an honest bruise among polite company, but Boyd didn't care. He walked inside, ignoring the careful glances of well-coiffed guests who remembered him as the blue-collar ex-husband, the outsider. Inside, the air shimmered with the scent of lilies and expensive perfume. Boyd followed the signs to the ballroom, each step tightening the knot in his stomach, not just from nerves, but from the knowledge of what was about to unfold. He spotted Trina near the front, her laughter a little too loud as she mingled with the Kellermans and their guests. Madison and Connor stood nearby, smartphones in hand, looking every bit the privileged children they had become. Boyd made his way to his assigned seat near the back, a calculated placement that stung more than he'd expected. He scanned the room, seeing faces from his past. Business partners who'd once shaken his hand, now pretending not to notice him. Violet had been invited as well, and she offered him a nod, her presence in the crowd a quiet reassurance. The ceremony was a spectacle of wealth and tradition. Laurel drifted down the aisle, radiant in designer lace, while Troy Kellerman waited with a practiced smile. As they exchanged vows, Boyd felt a pang, a mixture of pride and the ache of being an outsider at his own sister's celebration. As the congregation clapped and cheered, Boyd slipped out the envelope he'd brought, his hands steady. Inside, neatly collated documents detailed the Kellermans' questionable business alliances and risk-laden management of hazardous materials. He wasn't there to ruin the wedding, but rather to ensure that certain people knew the leverage he held. He discreetly handed the envelope to a trusted acquaintance from the St. Louis business community and murmured, "For insurance. Just in case." The man nodded, sliding the packet into his coat without a word. Boyd took his seat again and watched Laurel and Troy swirl into their first dance. Today, he wasn't merely there for family. He was there for the truth. "Yes, sir. One mistake, and the whole operation's at risk," Boyd said, letting the words hang in the air with just a hint of meaning. Robert seemed to catch the undertone, his gaze sharpening for a moment before smoothing into another practiced smile. "I'm sure you've done well for yourself in your field," Robert replied, finishing his scotch. Boyd smiled thinly. Enough to know how quickly reputations can change in this town, especially in circles like ours. Robert inclined his head, studying Boyd with new curiosity, or perhaps caution. "Indeed. Enjoy the evening, Mr. Mitchell." "You too, Robert," Boyd said, watching as the older man moved to join the receiving line, shaking hands and laughing as though nothing could touch the Kellerman name. Violet joined Boyd at the bar, her eyes flicking meaningfully toward Robert. "Everything okay?" Boyd nodded, his lips barely curving at the edges. "Perfect. Just reminding certain people what a tightrope they're really walking." Music from the dance floor swelled as Laurel tossed her bouquet, and laughter rippled through the crowd. Boyd lingered at the fringes, an island amid the celebration, but steadier now. His burden lightened just enough by knowing he held cards of his own. The clink of glasses, the gleam of polished silver, the muted drama swirling beneath the surface. It was all so predictable. But Boyd, for the first time in years, felt prepared for whatever would come next. He set his empty glass on the bar, shoulders squaring, ready to face both the battles and the opportunities the future might hold. Boyd followed him outside, the cool evening air swirling between them as the hum of the reception faded behind closed doors. Robert struggled to light the cigarette, flicking the lighter several times before finally managing it. He took a long drag, exhaling in a shaky stream. "What do you want, Mitchell?" Robert demanded, his voice low and furious. "Where did you get this information?" "Robert," Boyd replied calmly, "in our business, you hear things, see things. All it takes is listening in the right places." Robert's eyes narrowed, panic mingling with anger. "Do you have any idea what kind of damage this could cause if it gets out?" Boyd nodded slowly. "Exactly. That's why you'll want to listen carefully to what I say next." Robert stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Look, I don't know what you think you're doing, but this could ruin my family. My son, my wife, everything." He paused, searching Boyd's face. "What are you after? Money? Are you trying to extort me? Is this revenge for something?" Boyd shook his head. "It's not blackmail, and it's not about money." He fixed Robert with a steady gaze. "I want something far more valuable, Robert. I want some respect, for once. And I want my family to know the truth about who built their world." Robert pressed a hand to his forehead, visibly shaken. "What do you expect me to do?" "For starters," Boyd said, "let's not pretend any longer. You treat my family with courtesy. You explain to them, publicly if you have to, how essential my work has been, not just to your hotel chain, but to the whole community. You correct every lie, every slight, every dismissal, and you make sure they understand I was never beneath anyone in that room." Robert stared at him, realization slowly dawning. Boyd went on, his tone steady. "And rest assured, this is just the beginning. I'm not the only one in St. Louis with stories to tell, but what happens next depends on how you handle this." The two men stood in tense silence, the fate of both their families hanging in the balance. Boyd re-entered the reception hall, his heart pounding, but his face calm. He moved through the swirling crowd, his presence suddenly carrying a different weight. At the microphone, Laurel and Troy were finishing their thank you speech. Laughter and applause filled the room, the air thick with celebration and champagne. Robert Kellerman appeared at Boyd's side, pale and shaken. He clasped Boyd's shoulder for a moment, a silent acknowledgement of who held the power now. Then, steeling himself, Robert strode to the front of the room and tapped the microphone. The crowd's chatter faded as all eyes turned to him. "If I could have your attention, please," Robert began, his voice wavering just slightly. "I want to say a few words about something, or rather, someone I, and perhaps others here, have undervalued tonight." There was a ripple of confusion, then silence. Boyd Mitchell is not just Laurel's brother or a guest at this wedding. He is the founder and CEO of Mitchell Transport, one of the premier hazardous waste disposal and specialty logistics firms in the entire Southeast. Many of you may not realize how many companies, how many communities, including my own family's business, depend on Boyd and his team to operate safely and legally. Robert's gaze swept the room, his eyes landing on Trina, Madison, and Connor before continuing. "We owe him a debt of gratitude. He is a leader, an innovator, and a cornerstone of our community. Not just a man in a truck, but a business owner whose impact has touched everyone in this room, even if you didn't see it. Without Boyd's expertise and integrity, many of our industries would be at risk." He paused, swallowing hard. "And tonight, I realize how wrong it is to ever discount someone's worth because of the suit they wear or the dirt on their hands. Boyd, on behalf of my family and everyone here, I thank you." A stunned silence followed. Then, slowly, polite applause broke out, spreading through the hall. Boyd met Robert's gaze, nodding once. His family stared at him, faces a blend of astonishment and sudden shame. For the first time in years, Boyd felt seen, not as an afterthought or a disappointment, but as the man he truly was. He steadied himself, feeling the weight of a lifetime's worth of dismissal pressing on his shoulders. I'd also like to take a moment to clarify something that means a great deal to me. For years, some people, maybe even people in this room, have believed that blue-collar work is less worthy, or somehow less important, than what happens behind a desk or in a boardroom. Boyd's eyes flicked to his mother and Trina. But every suit, every luxury car, every thriving business here tonight depends on people who do the hard work behind the scenes. People who make sure waste is disposed of safely, that regulations are met, that communities stay clean, and families are protected. The room was silent now, breath held as Boyd continued. I built my company from nothing with hard work, sacrifice, and integrity. I provided for my family because that's what mattered most. And I stand here tonight not just as Laurel's brother, but as a man who knows his worth. I hope, moving forward, you'll remember that worth doesn't always come polished and neat. Sometimes it wears work boots and comes with calloused hands, and that's nothing to be ashamed of. Boyd handed the microphone back to Robert, who managed a trembling but genuine smile. The crowd responded with a stronger round of applause, several people rising in their seats, and Boyd caught a glimmer of pride in Violet's eyes from across the room. Dolores and Trina looked shaken, and Madison stared at Boyd, her phone forgotten in her lap. For just a moment, respect and regret mingled in the faces of the family who'd underestimated him. Boyd nodded at them, then made his way back to his seat, feeling lighter than he had in years. He had spoken his truth, and for once, it had been heard. Laurel was crying openly now, her words trembling. Boyd, that's not true. I didn't realize how bad it was. I swear, if I'd known. Boyd's voice was firm but calm. You knew. You just didn't care enough to listen. Not until tonight, when you realized what it might cost you. There was a silence heavy with regret on the other end. I'm sorry. I really am. Please, Boyd. Let's talk. Just us. No wedding. No pressure. Boyd looked out at the glittering scene inside, the expensive celebration unraveling at the seams. He inhaled deeply, feeling the weight of disappointment and clarity pressing down, then exhaling it away. Maybe another time, Laurel. But right now, I need to focus on getting well. You all have your lives. I have mine. And finally, I know how much that's worth. He ended the call, letting his phone rest heavy in his hand. For the first time, the loneliness he felt wasn't a burden, but a relief, a shield between him and the people who'd proven themselves undeserving. The night air was crisp with promise as he put his Silverado in gear, ready to drive toward St. Louis and a future that, for once, belonged entirely to him. At that moment, Boyd Mitchell knew that whatever battles still lay ahead, he would face them on his terms, and that finally he owed nothing to anyone but himself. In his place, a new man would emerge, one who understood the true value of self-worth, shaped not by external validation, but by the inner conviction won through hardship and revelation. Boyd gazed at the flickering shadows cast by the living room lamp, letting the weight of his decision settle in. There would be no grand gestures, no reconciliations or dramatic reunions, just the quiet dignity of a life rebuilt on his own terms. He sipped his bourbon, finally savoring the burn, feeling the boundaries of the old life dissolve into the silence. In the days ahead, Boyd would hand off his business, embark on his treatment, and step into a future of calculated independence, his skills and intellect quietly woven into a world far beyond the reach of those who once undervalued him. For the first time in years, he felt not loss, but freedom. Whatever happened at Johns Hopkins, recovery or not, Boyd Mitchell had reclaimed the narrative of his own story, and the road ahead was his to choose, paved by resilience and hard-won clarity. And as the night deepened over St. Louis, Boyd looked out at the quiet street, resolve solidifying in his heart. Whatever tomorrow brought, he was ready. Madison and Connor were now attending less prestigious universities, Curtis's own business having taken a turn for the worse after a scandal involving falsified sales records. The lavish lifestyles they'd grown so accustomed to disappeared almost overnight, replaced with part-time jobs and student loans. Trina had filed for divorce from Curtis, her social media feeds shifting from perfect family portraits to carefully curated inspirational posts about resilience and starting over. Boyd scrolled through the images and news headlines, feeling a strange detachment. No satisfaction, no bitterness, just an acceptance that the universe had finally balanced the scales in its own way. Frank watched him in silence for a moment, then raised his glass. To freedom, Boyd. To resilience and new beginnings. Boyd clinked glasses, meeting Frank's eyes with genuine gratitude. As they sipped their scotch, the lights of Georgetown sparkled around them, the river's surface reflecting the glow of a city that barely remembered the name Boyd Mitchell. For the first time, he truly felt at peace. No debts left unpaid, no ghosts clinging to his spirit. He had become a man defined not by what he'd lost, but by what he'd chosen to build. A life crafted on his own terms, answerable to no one but himself. As midnight approached, the city below quieted, leaving only the steady hum of possibility in the air. Boyd stood tall on the balcony, breathing in the crisp evening and looking forward, not back, knowing with certainty that his new life had only just begun. Boyd paused, keeping his tone neutral. "Why now, Connor?" There was a long silence on the line. "Everything fell apart after you left, Dad. We lost the house. Mom's working 2 jobs. Madison and I. We didn't know how much you really did for us. I'm sorry." "We all are." Boyd closed his laptop, gazing at the deep blue waters beyond the balcony. Memories flickered. Little league games, whispered bedtime stories, the steady presence he'd always tried to give his children. But he no longer felt the old ache or the desperation for acceptance. He had grown beyond those needs, learned to stand alone. "Connor," he said quietly, "I spent years proving my love and loyalty to a family that treated me as an outsider when I needed them most. I reached out for help, and you all chose to look away. Life's about choices, son. Yours and mine." Connor's voice cracked with emotion. "Dad, please, can we try, just to talk? Even if it's just once? I know we don't deserve it, but we could really use you right now." Boyd let the silence stretch, the sound of the Mediterranean surf below soothing his thoughts. "You can send me an email through my attorney's office," Boyd said finally, his voice even but not unkind. "Maybe, with time and effort, there can be a real conversation. But you need to understand, the person I was is gone. I'm not coming back, Connor. I wish you the best, truly." He ended the call gently, setting his phone aside. For a moment, Boyd allowed himself to feel the sadness of that last severing, then let it drift away, replaced by the steadfast conviction to live the life he'd earned. Surrounded by colleagues who had become family, and with a world of opportunity before him, Boyd Mitchell faced the future with peace. He knew at last that sometimes The greatest freedom comes when you stop waiting for the love you deserve and start giving it to yourself. Let them know that the door they chose to close will never open again, no matter how hard they knock, no matter how many apologies follow. My life is mine now, Connor. And for the first time, I'm surrounded by people who chose me for who I am, not what I can give them. He paused, letting his words linger before finishing quietly. I wish you well. I truly do. But I'm done looking back. Boyd ended the call, the weight of years dissolving into calm certainty. He stood gazing at the Monaco harbor as sunlight glinted off the water, feeling lighter than ever before. There was regret, of course, but it was a distant echo, far outnumbered by the gratitude he held for his new life and the wisdom he'd forged in fire. Packing for Prague and whatever came after, Boyd Mitchell closed the chapter on his past with unshakable resolve, determined to live each day forward on his own terms, with loyalty, love, and trust given only to those who truly deserved it. And the world, vast and open, awaited him with the promise of endless beginnings. The call ended, and Boyd set his phone down, feeling an unfamiliar sense of peace settle over him. He stepped onto the balcony, watching the city lights of Monaco dance on the water, the distant sound of laughter and celebration rising from the harbor below. For the first time, Boyd Mitchell felt the true meaning of freedom, not just from his past and his family's judgments, but from the need to prove himself to anyone but the man in the mirror. His life was built now on foundations of earned trust, quiet triumph, and self-respect. Every step he took was his own, every decision a testament to resilience. He lifted his glass in a toast to the night and all that lay ahead, not forgiveness for those who had failed him, but gratitude for the clarity that had come from surviving their absence. Boyd Mitchell, once overlooked and dismissed, now lived a life of adventure, respect, and fulfillment, owned by no one but himself, and finally, wonderfully, free.